Hills mansion. He kept the shades drawn and the house dark. Instead of rock and roll, Spector only listened to Wagnerian operas.
I would imagine only a Fellini movie could paint the picture of what it was like in that mansion with the tarpaulin over the windows so no daylight could get in.
In 1968, Phil Spector, now divorced from Annette Mirar, married Ronnie Bennett. But the marriage soured quickly. He was possessive, insecure, jealous, and he wouldn't let her out of his sight.
I tried to talk to Ronnie off and on, and when she'd want to go out, Phil wouldn't let her go out. My mind could not comprehend why he had somebody as talented as Ronnie and didn't want to do anything with her.
The verbal abuse was horrible, the yelling. I mean, he screamed, he wouldn't yell. I'm talking about like a lion would roar. That's how he would scream, to the point it does scare you.
3 months after their wedding, Ronnie filed for divorce, but Phil convinced her to stay.
I thought he was like so in love with me that he didn't want me out of his sight. I didn't get the part till way later in my marriage that he is so obsessive with me. I couldn't do anything down to taking a bath.
Phil and Ronnie wanted a family but were unable to conceive. In 1969, they adopted a baby boy, Dante Phillip.
2 days after we had the baby, he brings this lady. I've never had, her name was Mrs. Taylor, and that was the governess. I said, but what if I want to change his diapers? And he said, oh, you want to do that? And then when Dante was around 9 months old, I remember putting him up there and kissing him. He said, don't kiss him like that, you'll grow up gay.
Phil's behavior grew increasingly strange, and he surrounded himself with bodyguards.
He always liked to fancy himself a macho man if he could rub off a real macho man. If he could, have a real macho man finish the fights that he would pick.
And Ronnie, isolated from the world, drank, alone in her room.
I hated the taste, but that's how I got out every other month. Most people go to rehab to dry out. I went there so I could read, watch TV, just walk freely, play volleyball, just do normal stuff.
Professionally, Phil seemed finished. There was nowhere for him to go musically. By this time, his sound, the wall of sound, was dated.
Things were different. People wanted to get away from AM radio. They wanted to go to FM radio. They wanted albums. They wanted different sounds.
And then a turnaround. In 1970, John Lennon asked Phil to produce Instant Karma, one of his first solo efforts.
Lennon was beginning to enter his period of sort of diminishing the importance of the Beatles, so this was a nice kind of ego boost for him. Collaborating with Phil Spector, in John's mind, was a very big deal.
With the success of Instant Karma, Phil got an offer to produce the Beatles' final album. Work on the record was in a state of chaos.
They needed someone to save this album, but if you're the Beatles and you need a producer, you don't call the guy next door. You call the best producer in the world.
And he pulled it off. The album, Let It Be, topped the charts, generating 3 #1 singles. Let It Be also won a Grammy. And John Lennon continued to work with Phil. One of their hits, Imagine.
Imagine all the people living for today.
These were guys who could speak to each other very directly and collaborate in that way, and John really wanted that. I mean, he had Yoko to work with in that way to an extent, and now he had another collaborator, and that was very important to him, to replace Paul.
Musically, Phil was back. George Harrison also brought Spector on board for his first solo effort, All Things Must Pass.
Harrison had a #1 album with that and rewarded Phil with another gig, the Concert for Bangladesh at Madison Square Garden. It was a great, great signal moment in rock and roll.
Once again, Phil was hot, and in a bizarre gesture of affection to his wife, Phil adopted 5-year-old twin boys, Gary and Louis, and gave them to Ronnie as a Christmas gift.
He said, Merry Christmas. And the little boy said, hi. What? I don't know anyone that has given someone children as a gift.
There wasn't much time to bond with the twins. Only 6 months later, Ronnie was finished with her husband's controlling and obsessive behavior.
My mother passed 4 years ago, and she's the one that got me out of the mansion, because
at Phil if I